Well, welcome to the Aziz Podcast, and I'm your host, Khalid Aziz. This podcast is all about bringing you valuable leadership insights through our insightful conversations, we hope, with our expert coaches. I'm pleased today to say we're joined by David Bottomley and Anna Brown, and we'll be discussing in this podcast retirement coaching with our experts. Let's just meet them. Anna, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Khalid. So I'm an executive coach and I work with leaders from all sorts of industries and role types with via the business schools, but also via their organizations, and have really sort of specialized very much in transitions, which of course retirement is one as well.
Good. And David, what about you?
Yeah, hi, Khalid and everybody. I'm a leadership and business and personal coach. I am apparently retired, and I can say more about that later, having had a career in industry at fairly senior levels. But then my transition was to become a qualified coach 5 years ago, so I can relate my own experience of retirement, as we still call it.
Well, I suppose a little bit about me. I'm supposed to be retired, but it doesn't feel that way. I seem to be doing more and more, but that's because I have a very busy life with lots of different things, and not all of them are, if you like, gainful employment related. A lot of them are voluntary, and I've got lots of hobbies. So I think I know a bit about retirement, but I don't feel very retired. But I think that's quite an interesting issue when we talk about what's happened to the world of retirement. Been a lot of stuff in the media recently about, 70 is the new 50, and 80 could be the new 60. Goodness me, I wonder. So how has all this concept of retirement evolved? Because people are retiring very differently these days, are they not? David, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, once upon a time, retirement was an event and typically very close to the state pension age, wasn't it? If I think of my parents and grandparents. And that really has evolved quite significantly now. Retirement is a transition, isn't it? And typically starts a little bit earlier than it used to. And we typically live for longer and have a healthier lifestyle with far more opportunities for how we use our time post-retirement. So there is much more opportunity, I think, to transition into retirement and start thinking about it earlier. And then a whole lot of opportunities to use retirement in a wide range of different ways. I coach lots of people through retirement, and everybody's experience is quite different and quite personal. So, yeah, it's no longer about just putting our feet up for a few years, or that's still a choice, but most people have a much more active and interesting retirement than they used to have.
And Anna, do you think that therefore building on that traditional retirement is now totally outdated and there are now a whole raft of different ways of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about, the old saying used to be we would put people out to pasture. And, you think about the potential now. People are living longer. People are so much more healthy than they were in, my parents and grandparents' age. And so that the opportunity to do, to do so much more than they might have done previously. I think it's almost retirement is the wrong word. It's, we need to sort of think about, the next phase where they can perhaps think about a different opportunity or a series of opportunities that they can explore and use their skills in different ways. But it also might involve slowing down a little bit, which is also, something that would be welcome from many sort of fast-paced careers that people are experiencing in corporate life.
And what about the psychological and emotional challenges that executives face when they're transitioning out of their careers, out of their position? What are the key ones?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. There's the structure you get from daily work life, that there are meetings, you need to sort of deliver certain things at certain times. There's also the sense of identity. You are the chief exec, you are the sort of CFO. And, when you leave that role, who are you in this new paradigm? It can be quite difficult, as well as the sort of relational aspects. Quite a high percentage of your time is spent with a particular group of people that you work alongside. And so actually to start to sort of shift relationships, not just with perhaps loved ones that you're spending a bit more time with than you might have done previously, but also building new potential relationships. And I think there's also something around the sense of purpose and vision that you might have, because it can be so interwoven in with whatever the organizational purpose and vision is. But actually, you have an opportunity in some way to sort of carve something completely new out, which can be daunting, but also gives enormous potential. So I
And,
suppose those are some of the ones that I would think of.
and David, very much is it not the case that many people, particularly in senior positions, find that it is their work that defines them, because it is
Yeah.
absorbed, and that's quite a wrench. And it's all very well saying, "Well, I'd like to spend more time with my family." I do remember one very honest person once saying, I think he was a politician, saying, "Just to be sure, I'm actually retiring so I could spend less time with my family." It was unusual. I mean, reinventing yourself as a person without the trappings of great leadership
Yeah, I
can
think
be tricky.
I agree. I mean, work absorbs so much of our time and energy. And, as Anna's been saying, it provides so much of our needs as human beings, doesn't it? And in terms of identity, I mean, most people introduce themselves based on their job title. And you
Yeah.
see this on, any quiz program you tune into, what do you do? Well, I do this. Or even sometimes I'm a retired such and such, because that's how people have always defined themselves. And I think, particularly with executives, and I've been there, where your time, your energy, your thoughts are absorbed by work. And, as Anna's been saying, it gives you community and a tribe. It gives you a sense of achievement. It stimulates your brain and keeps you mentally active, and it gives you, hopefully gives you a level of meaning as well. And for all that, as I experienced, I retired in January 2020, no meetings, no job description, no boss, no milestone. Isn't that fantastic? Well, it is. But hey, in terms of psychological challenges, how do I fill my time? Hang on a minute. Do I need to fill my time?
Well, it's an interesting date that you gave us, because, of course, in February and March we had COVID strike,
Yeah,
and
nobody told me about that. Otherwise, I might have planned things slightly differently. But that whole thing, which planning, thinking ahead as to how I'm going to manage that psychological transition. And if we don't do that well, and we probably all know people who haven't, it can be really difficult, and people can become isolated. They can feel they've got no meaning, and they can find that transition incredibly challenging, particularly being in a high-powered job. Yeah.
so let's think about some practical steps then, in terms of what you say to help people shift their mindset when
Mm.
you're coaching them.
I mean, I tend to take people, or as far as possible, is to take them for walks rather than have the coaching sessions indoors. Because what I find is it's already removing them from that work context. So they can start to sort of explore what life might be like beyond the four walls of their office, and, start to think about actually what's important to me and what do I want those next steps to look like.
And how long, I mean, can you define, maximum and minimum amount of time that people need to put aside, both in terms of how much time they dedicate to the coaching process, but also how far out they start this process? Any thoughts, David?
I mean, I've coached people a year or two out. I mean, I think you could, in a sense, I don't think you can start too soon, because it's also about how we start to incorporate some of our retirement thinking and mindset before we retire. And I encourage executives particularly to, how are you going to start to slow down, and start to adopt some of the things in your life which are not entirely work focused. And, so for example, as a whole, how will you keep mentally fit? How will you keep physically fit? How will you stay healthy? How will you adapt to your new family situation? And to start to not only think about those before the date, but start to practice some of those changes. Because otherwise it's such a massive transition over a weekend, maybe. Far better to gradually ease into retirement and recognise that perhaps work isn't the only thing in our lives anymore. And one day, there's a guy I was coaching who suddenly realised that he was going to have to retire one day, whether he liked it or not. So you may as well start thinking about it sooner rather than later.
I know with some friends in the NHS who are surgeons, and they come back to 4 days and then 3 days. They think 2 days is not enough because, of course, you actually have to maintain the skill and so on. But they find that incredibly helpful. And surgeons, particularly, are not behind the door when it comes to having alternative things to do. But Anna, can you think of some examples of some good things that really work well and perhaps some things to avoid?
Yeah, I think one of the key factors as well is to think about the legacy that you're leaving behind. So often, yes, of course, we're thinking about that individual's next steps, but I found that it's really helpful for them also to think about what they've achieved and what they can create the conditions for the organization to continue to succeed when they're no longer there. And that really sort of seems to start the process of letting go, because that in some ways is almost as important as the next steps.
David?
Yeah, I think in terms of preparation, I think that's a really good point about making sure we leave well and leave behind without that sort of, people often, what will happen when I leave my organisation? Will they manage without me? Well, they will, won't they? But it's nice to leave with that good handover and that good feeling of leaving well. And recognising your achievements. And then I think it is all about looking forward, isn't it, to that opportunity and that autonomy. And, often, I find people who continue working part-time or start their own business take the opportunity to reflect on their careers and think, well, what transferable skills have I got? And where do I really want to make a difference and build a new legacy in a different world? And often that may be more in the community, it may be more socially directed. It may be working in the charity world as a trustee or a volunteer, and maybe being a bit more hands-on. I mean, when I was a director, I loved being a director, but sometimes you think I just want to do something myself and get out there in the world and make a difference, which is partly why I came into coaching.
I know, I'm a trustee of a number of charities and I chair most of them, but we've just taken on a new trustee with very specific skills, but he is in his early 80s. And there was a slight sort of, oh my goodness, but actually he's sharp. He's sharp as a tack. And, I think one has to never say never. And I turned around and said, well, if we get 6 months out of him, that's going to be a bonus. But I hope it's going to be a lot longer. The interesting point about being a good leaver, I think, is really key. Certainly when I'm coaching, I'm saying to people, look, you don't want to leave behind a mess. You do want to ensure that it's not just about how good a leader you were, but it's all about the leaders you leave behind because you've developed. Anna, what other bits of advice would you give to somebody if they're in the run up to a retirement for the sorts of things they do within their organization, apart from specify what kind of gold clock you want to be at your leaving do?
Exactly. Wow. So, there's particularly, David was saying about, you can start this process quite early on. And I think with a run up of, it could be as early as 3 years ahead, but you have such an opportunity to start to develop a structure that effectively puts you out of a job in a really healthy way for the organization and allows those in your team to grow and develop as you sort of start to step away. And I think quite often, if there is a sort of brinkmanship around, leaving that sort of activity to the last minute, it can cause quite a shock to the organization. It's with most things, there's a balance to be struck, because also if you announce it to the world that you're going, then it does, to an extent, influence or take back some of the influence that you might have, and therefore you have less of an impact than you might have done. And that's not helpful for the organisation either.
Yeah, it's the old political issue, isn't it? You become a lame duck leader then because
Exactly.
you're going. And that's that can be tricky. I suppose the other thing that's tricky and what does drive people is an interesting conundrum which I've discussed with some of my clients is because we have so few final salary pensions now because of the cost. Everybody's in defined benefit schemes. There's a pot of money off which you have to lead. Without getting too political, of course, the latest advice is you should spend it as quickly as you can because the government's going to get their hands on it. But that you can have a situation where, excuse my doorbell going off, which just shows we're all working from home these days. But you can have a situation where I don't think people particularly want to know the date of their death, but they really don't know how to manage their money. And uh, I certainly have put some clients in touch with people who know a bit more about money than most of us do, and
Mm.
help them. But it is a tricky conundrum, and it adds to the anxiety, and overcoming that is pretty tricky, is it not?
I think one of the big challenges I find, Khaled, is that people, how prepared are we to spend more than we have income coming in? Because we spend our whole working life, don't we, accumulating. We want to earn more than we spend as a family unit, certainly. And that transition to, well, I know I've always been saving for my retirement, but actually spending more than my income and dipping into those reserves is quite a big psychological barrier.
Here it is. The time has come, and we now need to,
Yeah,
the financial boys call it, it's the drawdown.
yeah, start.
People are reluctant to draw down, aren't they? And
Yeah,
they therefore die with millions.
yeah. So enjoy it. Go on the holidays, spend the money.
Yeah,
Mm.
So you
yeah.
can't take it with you.
I have a wonderful friend in Derbyshire who, there's a sort of phrase that he used to come up with, which is, he said, "You've got to drink it while it's fizzy," and
I like
I
it.
love that,
that's not a bad watchword really to live your life by.
for sure.
Anna, when we look at people who are very close to retirement, and we get some people who say, "That's it. I just want to get out of it." And you know, I often find it sad when some people say, "No, I couldn't wait to retire," because actually, work is good if it's the right work and it suits you. So, getting under the skin when you're coaching, when you get a new coachee come to you and working out what they really want, what tools do you use to do that?
I use a tool that really sort of allows them to get a sense of a number of factors at once. So that might be, what's their big vision? What are the footsteps they want to leave in the sand? There's also things around, what is it that they've enjoyed? What really helped them flourish in their career? And what actually do they want to leave alone? I mean, when I was, made the shift from a super busy leadership experience to being a coach, one of the things I just did not want to be working all hours. I wanted to have a much more space in my calendar. So really sort of getting a sense of who they are, what relationships they want to build, and what the context they want to create, but all in the pursuit, I guess, of a vision that they might have for for some people, they really want to make a difference in their community for some cause or other. Others, want to go into coaching or help people develop in some way or other. And for some, a combination of all of those, and also things like you were mentioning, Khalid, about being a trustee or having a non-exec director type portfolio, or being a consultant. Each individual's so different and so unique, and it's so important to sort of connect with that and get a sense of what matters to them, and really work with that.
Yes, I mean, that sense of balance, work life, of course, is the classic one. But I mean, it's just another form of time management. It's just, and you're talking about, I was brought up by the time management principles of a chap called James Noon, sadly no longer with us.
Mm.
I found him to be inspirational in terms of his insights into time management. And it is about making sure you block out the time to do the things you really want to do. But of course, your priorities shift, and we as coaches can help people shift their priorities and understand, help sort of hold the mirror up to them and say that this is what you seem to be saying, and is this right? What other tools do you use, David?
I use, well, a couple of things. One is a tool that's based on 9 basic human needs, and I invite people to assess which of those are fundamentally covered by work, and therefore, when you start working full time, you may still work part time. How will that change, and what might you put in place to tick those boxes? So things that we mentioned around security, sense of achievement, sense of meaning, a community, how we'll replace those. But also there's some new ones that come into play quite significantly, like autonomy. So one of the big benefits of retirement is we have much more autonomy, don't we? Because we don't have a boss and a job title and a set of objectives. So I work through that model. I do work around values, which is similar to what Anna was saying. What are our core values? How many of those have we really been exercising through our last exec role? Maybe some of them, but maybe some different values. And our strengths, what strengths do we have that we may want to use in a different way? So I take people through a number of exercises just to get them thinking about, once I'm here, how will I fulfill, my needs, my values and my strengths.
And there's also the aspect, is there not, of how their individual values chime with those of their partners? Because I remember hearing one woman around the dinner table say, well, I married him for love, not for lunch. And he's always here, he's under my feet, and that's a big transition for your partner too. I mean, it might be the other way around, and all those things that they assume would happen may not happen because they haven't discussed it.
Yeah, I encourage people to have some independent life as well as, depends, doesn't it, whether your partner's retiring or not as well at the same time. So there's different combinations.
Yes. And of course, if your partner then gets busier and leaving you, the roles can get reversed. You can be the golf widow or widower, and it all takes a very different slant if one's not careful, and it comes up to hit you as well. It is so life changing. Well, we've got a few minutes left, so I'd like to just give you a bit of time now each to give us your key takeaways from this. So what should people be really thinking about now as a sort of some key points, maybe 3 or 4 if you've got them. Anna, you first.
I want to build on something David said earlier, which I think is really important. It's around really paying attention not just to what you're doing, but also the aspects, things like, obviously the financial considerations that can cause, real stress and worry. But there's also things around health. How long do you want to be healthy and fit to, go on long coastal walks or, play golf or tennis or whatever. So there's to really think about it holistically. Think about all aspects. How are you going to be creative? How are you going to challenge your brain? How are you going to meet new people? So really sort of think about it in the round, and don't, absolutely what you said about, there's your partner will also have things that they want to do, and to have something that you can do yourself that fulfills your own interests, but also allows you to spend time with family and friends.
Yes, I mean, some of our Aziz coaches do involve partners with the sanction of the primary coachee, but that can make a lot of difference sometimes. Sometimes it can veer into marriage guidance, so you've got to be a bit careful. But keeping to the brief is probably all right if you can manage that. David, how about you?
I think it's, as we've been saying, it's recognising this is a significant, if not the most significant, transition that you may make. So going into that with our eyes open in terms of what we're leaving behind and what we might need to replace. But the other big thing, it's a wonderful opportunity, isn't it? There is so much opportunity in retirement to enjoy things we haven't enjoyed and to fulfill ourselves in ways that we haven't been fulfilled. And I would say that for myself. And in the coaching, therefore, to explore what do you really want to do? What have you not been able to do because you're too busy? What will you do with this time and energy for your own enjoyment without the pressure of expectations from an organisation? So I think it's huge liberation, but as well as really thinking carefully about, what am I going to do to make sure I'm still connected to people? What will I do to make sure I'm still got a sense of achievement, etc., etc. And then put that plan together.
And I suppose the one thing I would add to that is that a key factor I see all the time is people's attitude towards loss of status, the status the job delivers them. That can be psychologically really challenging for people. And what I try and do is help them understand that status is all very well, and it's important. You can't get away from that. But actually transitioning to someone that is got worth for themselves rather than for their title is really good. And I have to say, I mean, we've been going over 40 years now in our business, and some of our clients have become coaches for Aziz, which is very gratifying. And many of them are rather more mentors than coaches because of all their grey hair. Nothing wrong with that, of course, I would say. And it's been fascinating to watch some of those grow into mentorship and find a newfound status, which is the status of helping somebody else. You can't put an old head onto young shoulders, but you can speed the process of learning up a bit by just showing people some of the things. What's that great Mark McCormick book? Some of the things they don't tell you at Harvard Business School. But there you are.
Lovely.
Well, thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. And if you want to find out more about Aziz Corporate and the services we offer, or to get in touch with Anna or David, please contact us at hello@azizcorp.com. And of course, you can always visit our website, www.azizcorp.com. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you.